If you've been trying to improve your body composition by following the mainstream advice and it's not working, it's not your fault. It's metabolic syndrome. I'm going to talk about three key reasons why following the mainstream advice is not going to work to improve your body composition. Number one is hormones. Hormones is a very big topic, and we could talk for hours and hours all about hormones. But when it comes to body composition, really the center of the target, the top of the pyramid when it comes to hormones is insulin. Insulin really is the gatekeeper of, is your body in fat storage mode or is it in fat burning mode? The higher your insulin is, the greater the chance that your body is in fat storage mode. The lower your insulin is, the greater the chance that your body is in fat burning mode. And the food composition in your diet makes all the difference when it comes to where insulin is at on sort of the spectrum. And the mainstream advice does not at all take into account the influence of food on insulin. That's number one. Number two is meal timing, because it's not all about what to eat. It's also about when to eat. We know that all of our foods are basically made up of three main macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And the way that our body processes these foods is different depending on the time of the day. For example, there's been studies, mostly from Satchin Panda out of the Salk Institute, and his lab has identified that most of the organs in the body have sort of an optimal clock of function. And if we make them work outside of that optimal window, they don't really work right. And if we're consuming too many foods throughout the 24-hour day period, in other words, if our eating window is too broad, that's going to influence in a really significant way our body composition. So that's not all about calories. Calories is kind of the classic model that's involved in the mainstream advice. You just need to eat less and exercise more. And it's all about calories, calories, calories. That's only true up to a certain point. But then we have to start taking into account things like hormones that we just talked about and the timing of the optimal function of our organs of digestion. Like, for example, if we're eating in too broad of an eating window, there's not really an opportunity for the body to burn up the stored fat that's in the system. So our body can only handle about 2,000 calories of glucose, but we could store tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of calories of fat. But depending on the timing of our food choices, that very much dictates if your body's going to choose to use some of that fat for fuel. And so from the Salk Institute, the researcher named Satchin Panda and his lab has taken a really important dive into the optimal sort of window of eating and in the optimal window of not eating. And basically what they discovered is if we make our organs of digestion function in sort of the wrong time frame, then the body is going to be more prone to producing and storing fat. Like, for example, our body is not, especially our organs of digestion, are not really optimally designed to be consuming food at night. We know that by consuming food past our window of optimal function, the organs of digestion are more prone to producing fat from the fuel that has come in from the foods that have been chosen, as opposed to storing it as, energy that's usable. And since the body is typically going to be sedentary late at night, then the body, especially the muscles, are not going to be taking up the glucose that they typically would be. And so the body's more prone, especially the liver is more prone to converting some of that glucose into fat, put it in fat storage, and it's not being utilized as fuel. So we've talked about two things so far. We've talked about the control and influence of insulin on your body composition, and we've talked about meal timing. Those two things are not at all being considered in the mainstream advice. The third thing is calorie composition. Remember, we talked about the three macronutrients. All of our foods, all of our meals are made up of three macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And in the caloric model of eat less and exercise more, the source of the calories is really not taken into account. The mixture of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins is not at all considered. And so it's not just the quantity of the calories that matter. It's much more about what is this source of those calories. And if we can make certain food choices that influence our hormones in a positive way, the meal timing is more in alignment with our sort of healthy window of digestion and assimilation and disposal of these nutrients like glucose, and the composition of the calories is more in favor of fat burning. Then if we put these three things together, you have a much, much greater chance of improving your body composition over time. And those three things are not taken into account at all in the mainstream advice. So hopefully you learned something. I will keep bringing you more and more information based on science, based on data, based on my clinical experience. So if you like what you heard, please subscribe, leave a comment, and I will keep bringing you the information. Until then, keep it real.